Well, good afternoon. Oh, you can do better than that. Good afternoon. That is my topic, but there wasn't quite enough wine in it. It's more like, what if I don't want to be one with them? The inconvenient truth of non-duality. I want to start first with sharing with you a few of the, I'll call it like organizing principles that I'm working with. That when I'm speaking, you will find me often going back and forth between the micro and the macro, because from an organizing principle, I'm starting from the standpoint that the macro and the micro are just relative matters of degree. They're not really different substance. There aren't different laws and principles for the individual or for the collective, because the collective is just the summation of the individual. So the work that we do at the individual level has an impact on the collective, and the collective is a reflection of where we are at the individual. That if we're ever going to really get any systemic change done at a broad level, it means that we're going to have to do something at the individual level. Another principle that I'm working with is that activity and action are not the same thing. As human beings, we have a tendency to want to do things, and we get involved in a lot of different kinds of activities, but not all activities actually result in some kind of action. So when I use the word action, I'm talking about getting some results, not just running around doing a whole bunch of things. Once again, in terms of our human condition, we have an extraordinary capacity to be at cross purposes, to think one thing, to do something else, to feel something else, and say something completely different than that. And our most optimal place is when we are actually in alignment, that there's something that happens when we are in congruence that creates a coherence that allows for a greater degree of regeneration, for sustainability, and overall vitality. So that it is important for us to bring it all together, so to speak, and to live a life that is balanced in harmony, where we are integrating our actions, the things that we're actually doing, with what we say, in fact, are our beliefs. We got to bring it together. And last but not least, that this idea of non-duality, this idea that there's some kind of inherent interconnectedness between us all, I believe is a mandate. I don't think it's just a theoretical construct, but if, in fact, there is some interconnectedness between all of us, I think it is a mandate for us to take action that acts like that is indeed the case. I'm just saying. Maybe it's just me. So I'm going to be asking us some questions as we go along about how consistent are we? Where is the evidence in how we are conducting our lives that we really believe that the world is non-dualistic? I will interchange the words non-dualistic with oneness, probably say oneness more often, to be honest. And that's partly because as an organizer and a strategist, I think it's very important that we always put forth what we do want and not just what we don't. So to be very clear that I'm talking about oneness, and that oneness puts a mandate on us to look at things beyond just whatever is going on in our own individual lives, and to be responsive to something that happens in the collective. So why is this thing, oneness, non-duality, an inconvenient truth? Well, it's an inconvenient truth for a couple of reasons. One is that it presents a clear and present danger to existing paradigms. That where we are now in the 21st century, the dominant paradigms that we have around the world are based in dualistic thinking, based in an us versus them, masculine or feminine, heart versus the mind, the macro versus the micro, where we have this idea of an othering that takes place there. And the whole idea of oneness and non-duality cuts at the very heart of that. So that if we actually live that, it would mean a reordering of the most basic infrastructures that we have in our society. Every politic, every economic, every religious view, any of the large institutions, they're all based upon a worldview, what we consider to be the natural order of things. And if the natural order of things is non-duality, then we can't justify what we're doing. Let me give you an example. If you take, for example, the civil rights movement in the United States, or pretty much anywhere around the world, it's pretty much the same thing. That we call it a civil rights movement, but in actuality, it was a non-dualistic movement, a oneness movement, or what I would call a spiritual movement. What it set out to say is that there is an inherent relationship that we have between one another, and this inherent relationship that we have is one of equality, is one of sameness, that we are all from the same source, that we are infused with the same capabilities, and that if this is indeed the case, you can't justify discrimination. You can't justify racism. You can't justify any of these things because they don't have any legs to stand on. So the importance of this is starting the whole sacred activism part of the afternoon here. So the point of why I bring this up is that it shifts the work that we do. If we're doing sacred activism, we're not doing it to create equality, we're doing it to unleash it. Hear the difference. It isn't that we're expecting the laws or anything to change to give us equality. We start with equality as a self-evident truth. And then our charge is to get rid of all the impediments, to get rid of all the obstructions. This is something that was a great misunderstanding in the marriage equality movement here recently in the United States, where people kept thinking that the courts were giving same-sex couples the right to marry. No, they were giving them the freedom to marry, declaring that they already had the right. They already had that right as U.S. citizens, and that right had been unjustly held from them, so they were merely taking away the impediments. Like the voting rights bill didn't give black people the right to vote in the South. They already had the right, but there were the impediments. So imagine how different your work would be if you started off with, I'm equal, or they're equal. If we started off with the idea that this is the natural order of things, and that we're not asking for equality, we're asking for justice. We're not asking for validation. We're already showing up perfect, whole, and complete, and doing the work that's necessary in order for society to affirm what we already know to be true at the deepest, most scientific and spiritual level. That becomes our work. Yes. Now, that being so, one would think that those individuals who are at the vanguard, who are at the forefront for equality and liberty and justice, would in fact be happy about the idea of non-duality, would be happy about the idea of oneness, that those individuals would never want to separate. Those individuals would never, ever, 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 ever want to even conceive of a situation where they were not in direct relationship with everybody. Everybody. So a couple of weeks ago in Santa Cruz, is where I live now, originally from Los Angeles, we were celebrating the 54th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. The speech was being divided up, and several of us were given sections of the speech to read. And as fate would have it, I had the actual part about the dream. It is a wonderful speech, which I highly recommend that people look at and listen to. Like we pick out little pieces of it, but don't see the whole thing in context. And part of what he is saying in this dream is that he had a vision. And he had a vision, he said, of the sons of slave owners and the sons of slaves walking hand in hand together. That he had this dream of little black boys and girls and little white boys and girls walking together hand in hand. Now, today we look at that and go, oh, that's just a beautiful Hallmark moment. But in the day, that was heresy. In the day, you could get lynched for any of that. So afterwards, when I have a chance to address the audience, not unlike here, and I said, so we're here honoring King, and I really believe that if you honor people, you try to carry on their work, their vision. You don't just, oh, weren't they a great person? You look and see what about their legacy compels you to a higher place of inspiration in your own life. So I just posed the question. I said, so this idea of the sons of slave owners and the sons of slaves walking hand in hand together, is that your vision today? I said, is it your vision that the sons and daughters of Holocaust survivors and the sons and daughters of Nazis walked hand in hand together? Is it your dream, because I knew the kind of crowd that I was talking to, pretty liberal, amazing. I said, is it your dream that your kids are going to walk hand in hand with the alt-right kids? The gasps were so loud, you would have thought I threw mama off the train or something like, it's the big one. Yeah. I just said, well, if that's not your dream, then what's your dream? And why are we here? Just breathe that in for a moment. If that's not your dream, then why are we here? If we really are about oneness and we really are about non-duality, that has to mean everybody. What I tell my congregation all the time is that the moment you come to me and say, well, yeah, Reverend Deborah, the moment you say but, listen to what I'm saying. The moment you say but, you have now dropped off, fallen into non-duality. You've fallen into duality. The moment you say but, the moment that you are looking for any kind of exclusion whatsoever, you've stepped off your belief in non-duality. You've stepped off your belief in oneness. I can remember, maybe 20-something, 30 years ago, when I first thought about this, and I said, wow, this means my family, they're spiritual beings too? Really? Who knew? I was busy trying to leave them to get to the spiritual ones. And it was just amazing when I decided to put them in instead of outside of, but in it. And you know what? I actually enjoyed their company that day. I really did. It was amazing. I had made this decision to go to the Thanksgiving dinner, like every single person in my family was a spiritual being, and that they had more about them than just the story that I had going on about them, and that I was going to listen and be present with them. That I was going to listen and be present with them. See, part of the problem that we have now, and the way we go about trying to create action, is we get into what's sometimes referred to as identity politics. And with identity politics, we're more than just describing our collective experience as a particular group. It literally starts to become an identity that is mutually exclusive to and oppositional to other certain people. The othering is how we keep these identities going. And it wouldn't be such a problem if we didn't believe in our minds that somehow or another, showing compassion towards those people that did us wrong, or somehow moving in the middle to some kind of compromise with these people who are obviously the culprits or the villains, that's too often perceived as being a traitor. That somehow or another it's betrayal. We even see it in our political system right now, this huge gridlock, where sometimes people are too afraid to speak their own conscience because of loyalty that's there to some kind of partisan ethic, and heaven forbid that it should look like I'm fraternizing with the enemy, even at the excuse of doing something that I know is a better or higher thing to do. We do the same kind of thing in our own lives. Well, what are you doing talking to them? You knew what he did to us. Well, what are you doing going over there? Well, how could you possibly imagine that? I remember growing up wondering, why was it that people even got married, honestly? Because if the whole thing was being portrayed as a battle of the sexes, and within the construct of the masculine and the feminine, or the embodiment of that in males and females, there was already this pre-gone assumption that neither one was ever going to understand the other one, or that to even try to was somehow or another to make them less of who it is that they are. Why are we even bothering to do that? Here's what I know, is that if we actually are about this non-duality, if we are actually about oneness, that means we have to put ourselves in it, and we have to put ourselves in it, and that everything that we do must show that we believe everybody's in it. With the identity politics, so often we know who you are not by what you stand for, but whom or what you stand against. So I'm looking to see who you are by what you're against. And I know you're one with me because we're against the same things. Let your life show what you stand for, not just what you stand against. If somebody were to look at your social media, if somebody were to look at your websites that you browse through, if they were to eavesdrop on your conversations, if they were to look at your emails, if they were to look at the little memes that you pass around when you text, and I'm guilty, some of that stuff's funny. But I have to check myself on it once I do it and realize, oops, you just fell into that again. Come back. You know, none of us stay on point all the time. There's not a chiropractic adjustment to end all chiropractic adjustments. You know, life happens. So we're constantly getting back on point, constantly getting back on point. But does your life stand for what you want? Can people see everywhere within what you do the evidence that oneness is really what you believe in? can they see that? And last but not least, why this non-duality is a very inconvenient truth, is that we cannot resolve the nations, the communities, the things in your home, a global level. We can't resolve anything just working with the people who are on your side. My very good friend and mentor, Michael Bernard Beckwith, whom I grew up with in Los Angeles, has this saying that he just grilled into us. There are at least two sides to every story, and then there's the truth. There are at least two sides to every story, and then there's the truth. And as long as I'm stuck on my side, that puts me in a position of a kind of a self-righteousness. How many of us go, let's just say, to something like joint therapy, really not with the intention to hear or to listen, but hoping a third party can, like, get through? Get through to this bozo. I'm going because I can't get through. Maybe you can help them hear me. Not, I'm going to go to learn something about them. Rarely is that really our impetus. Anytime that there's change, and I mean action that brings change, it is of necessity going to have to involve the very people that you may even think you are at war with. Nelson Mandela could not have ended apartheid without joining forces with de Klerk. It wasn't going to happen. Slaves were not in the position to free themselves from slavery. Women were not in the position to give themselves the right to vote. People with disabilities weren't in the power positions to sign the American Disabilities Act. That any time that we're moving forward, we are forging a new we. Let that settle in for a second. It's not those of us over here are going to win. It's not we won, W-O-N, it's we are one, O-N-E. And when we move from we won to we're one, it's going to mean that we show up differently. It's going to mean that in our vision of the future, we're looking for a new order of things that can include everyone. Everyone. So whether you're dealing with things in your own home, your school, your job, your neighborhood, the nation, the globe, no matter what it is, I'm imploring you to really stand in what you say you believe in. That if you really, really stand for oneness and non-duality, then let's act like it. Let it be evident in the way we organize, in our speech, in our embrace, in our willingness to have a transcendent view, with the understanding that if I get up off of my side, doesn't mean that I'm caving in or losing my values. It just means I'm not being so entrenched. We mistakenly think that conflict comes from differences. But differences in and of themselves don't cause conflict. Conflict comes from polarization. It's the polarization itself that is the conflict. The polarization itself is the conflict. However you get something is what you have to do to maintain it. We can't get to peace through war. You can't get to unconditionally loving relationships through judgment. We can't get to harmony and wholeness through othering. It's just not going to happen. There are many who don't believe in oneness. There are many who are really, really entrenched in an opposite worldview. And whereas I don't necessarily agree with them, I got to give them a lot of credit for their consistency and their comprehensiveness and their unwavering commitment to it. Everything is energy. Everything is energy. And I have a hope, I have a dream, that if those of us who say we actually believe in oneness and non-duality had as much unwavering commitment, were as comprehensive and unyielding, if we really stood on the idea that peace is the way as much as those who believe that war is the way, believe that war is the way, if those of us who really believe stop looking outside at who has more power and what's got to change and who's doing what to whom, but just collectively, energetically put a demand out into the universe for the truths that we know, they cannot help but manifest. They cannot help but manifest. So we're in some crazy times, yes, but I'm hopeful. I really am, because I see unprecedented opportunities now that we're out of denial to get into alignment. And let's really do this thing called peace, love, justice, and harmony. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.